I did not expect the silence in that room to sting more than the insult itself. But it did. I had asked a simple question. One that deserved a respectful answer, not a smug shrug and a rehearsed, soulless phrase. Company policy. That was it. No eye contact. No justification. Just a smirk from a man half as experienced and twice as confident for no reason at all. They thought I would nod and walk away. They had no idea what I had already placed on the CEO's desk that very morning. My name is Elin. I am 34 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I had spent 9 years as a senior project liaison at Wexley Technologies. I was fluent in 5 languages, managed a regional team spread across 3 continents, and I was the only person on staff who could negotiate directly with our Chinese partners, without a translator or an intermediary. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button. The pay cut came quietly. No meeting. No email. Just a discrepancy in the pay slip that I almost missed during a late evening of bill sorting. I stared at the number for a long time, thinking maybe I had misread it. After all, mistakes happened. Maybe this was a glitch. A clerical error. It was not. I took it up with HR first. A polite inquiry, nothing accusatory. I remember the woman at the desk, Jocelyn, looked at me as though I had asked her for the company's security codes. She blinked, pretended to type, and then finally leaned back in her chair and said, "Oh yes." There were adjustments made across some roles. Budget reallocation. Adjustments? I asked what that meant. She said my pay had been realigned based on departmental restructuring. But a week later, during a routine onboarding meeting, I saw something I was not supposed to see. A slide left open on a junior manager's screen, accidentally projected during a presentation, showed signing bonuses for 2 newly hired associates. $25,000 each. They were in my department. They had no experience in our region. And one of them had actually listed basic conversational Mandarin on their application. I remember that because I had read it myself when asked to give input. I went straight to my direct supervisor, Darren Callum, a man who wore expensive suits like they were personality traits and always smelled like too much cologne and too little integrity. He leaned back, smiled like a toothpaste commercial, and said, "That is just how it works, Elin. Fresh incentives attract new talent. Do not take it personally." I blinked. "So let me get this straight. You cut the pay of someone who has held this department together for nearly a decade to give signing bonuses to fresh graduates." He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Come on. It is not that simple. Plus, this is all from higher up. You are a loyalist. That is why we know you will adapt." Adapt. I left his office in silence. But I was not quiet inside. I was already calculating. Already planning. What no one at that table knew was that I had been approached by one of our partner firms in Shanghai just a month before. They were building their own platform, quietly recruiting for a strategic expansion into Europe. They wanted someone who understood both ends, the cultural context and the technical landscape. They wanted me, but I had said no, because I believed in loyalty. I had told them, "Thank you, but I am committed where I am." That conversation had ended politely, but they had left the door open. And now I was staring at that door with new eyes. I did not walk through it right away. No. First, I started gathering contracts, correspondence, communication breakdowns I had patched up, times where my language skills alone had prevented entire projects from falling through. I collected everything. I printed copies, documented my contributions with precise timelines. I highlighted contracts I had helped win, nearly $67 million in direct revenue over the past 4 years. And I wrote a letter. Not bitter. Not emotional. Just facts. Dates. Numbers. Responsibilities that no one else in the company even knew existed, let alone understood. I included testimonials from our Chinese partners, translated and notarized, praising the clarity and trust they had developed working with me. Then I placed it all, printed and organized, inside a black folder marked only with the initials EC. I walked into the building the next morning as though it was any other day. I smiled. I greeted reception. I dropped the folder off with a simple message for the CEO's assistant. For Miss Caldwell's review. No rush. And then I went to my desk and worked as though nothing had changed. Because nothing had. Yet. I waited until Friday afternoon, the time when most of the executive floor was already thinking about early dinner reservations or late meetings they planned to take from home. That is when I sent my email. It was short, formal. Subject, departure notice, Elin Carter. Body, effective immediately. Please find all final documents and relevant transition notes in a shared folder marked handover. No drama, no rant, just an exit. Within 30 minutes, my phone buzzed. For missed calls. 2 voicemails. All from internal lines. I turned it off. Because by then I was already in a different office. In a different building. Across town in a private meeting room at the Shanghai firm's European branch. Signing papers. They gave me a compensation package that was nearly triple what I was earning. They valued my experience, my ability, and most of all, my voice. But the real storm? That came the next Monday. I heard about it through someone on the inside. A former intern I had mentored, now quietly texting me from the elevator lobby. They just opened your folder, she wrote. The CEO is in the boardroom. No one is speaking. Darren looks pale. I think they had no idea. Of course they had no idea. Because they had never thought they needed to know. The silence that followed was not immediate. It was delayed, a strange, tense lag between action and consequence. But when it hit with the force of something long ignored, now fully awake. I did not check my inbox again. I had no intention of replying. But word found its way to me anyway, quiet messages from colleagues, hints from people who had always watched more than they spoke. Apparently, the CEO had paused halfway through my folder. Not because she was finished, but because she was furious. Her name was Margaret Caldwell. I had met her only twice, both times in passing. She was sharp, composed, and painfully efficient. She spoke in clipped phrases and made decisions faster than most people blinked. She had been brought in just under a year ago to reshape operations. What she had not known, because no one had thought it worth mentioning, was that nearly every bridge to our Asian partnerships had one single point of contact: me. The folder laid that bare. It was not just language. It was trust. In every deal, every agreement, every joint venture or subtle conflict resolution, I had been the unseen thread tying everything together. They did not list me on those deals because they did not think they had to. My work lived in calls, handwritten notes, back-channel clarifications. And now I was gone. The first real crack came Wednesday morning. I was told one of the firm's largest clients, a manufacturer based out of Guangzhou, had refused to join a scheduled video conference. Their reasoning was polite but pointed. Our liaison is no longer present. We will wait for her replacement or suspend discussions until clarity is restored. I knew exactly what that meant. In their world, it was a sharp rebuke. Then came the call. Not from Wexley, but from the CEO of the Shanghai firm, the one I had just joined. He said, "We are hearing from partners you used to manage. They want to follow you. Are you comfortable with that?" I paused. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed a moment to appreciate what was happening. They want to transfer their contracts? I asked. They're saying if you are leading integration from our side, they would prefer to consolidate under our umbrella, he replied. We would welcome it. Of course, it would have to be structured cleanly. Of course. And legally, that was simple. They were not bound by exclusivity. That was the second crack. And from there, the fracture lines spread like lightning across dry earth. 3 days later, an internal email from Wexley leaked. Not to the public, just among former employees. Someone had forwarded it to me. It was from Margaret. Subject: urgent action required, contract review, and liaison gap. Body: we are currently facing unexpected disruptions across 4 strategic partner channels. Please compile a comprehensive list of alternative liaison candidates with Mandarin proficiency and a history of East Asian market experience. Priority review is required. This is a Tier 1 recovery item. Translation: they were scrambling. But the thing about scrambling is that it does not fix things, it just shows panic. I heard they tried to approach one of the new hires, the same ones who had received those glowing bonuses, and ask if either of them could step in. One apparently said, "I only took an elective in Mandarin. I cannot even order food properly." That was their third crack. And then came the part that even I had not fully anticipated: retaliation disguised as regret. An HR representative, not Jocelyn, a different one, reached out via a mutual contact. She said, "The company would like to have a conversation, just to see if there is a pathway to reconnection." Reconnection? As if they had not severed the thread themselves. I gave a polite no. No elaboration. Just a boundary. 2 days later, they tried again, this time through a former executive who is still on my LinkedIn connections list. He messaged me directly. "Elin, you know I always respected your work. Margaret wants to schedule a meeting. She is willing to talk about reinstatement at an executive level. Full control over international strategy." I read that message twice. Then again. I did not respond immediately. Not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted them to feel the waiting. I finally replied, "I appreciate the message, but I have moved forward. And upward." And that was it. That week, our team at the Shanghai firm onboarded the first of 3 transferred accounts, clients who had terminated their Wexley contracts early, just to realign under our umbrella. What was more important than the revenue, though that was significant, was the statement it made. Because Wexley had not just lost me. They had lost the trust one carried. And they could not buy that back with bonuses. Meanwhile, in my new role, I was given a team of 10, direct authority over all regional strategy, and the freedom to build something from the ground up, with integrity and purpose. But what brought me the most quiet satisfaction was not the job title. It was not the office view. It was knowing that every single person who had shrugged at me, who had assumed I would swallow the insult and stay silent, now had to sit in rooms where my name was mentioned with weight. Not as a footnote, not as a memory, but as the reason something no longer worked. I did not go looking for revenge. But when it stood right in front of me, knocking on doors I had once built from the ground up, I did not walk away either. Revenge, for me, was not dramatic. It was quiet, clinical, earned.
And it was already underway.
3 weeks into my new role at Sanyu Global, I was invited to attend a summit in Seoul, an executive roundtable between East Asian innovators and European investment strategists. It was the kind of room Wexley had tried for years to enter, usually through corporate sponsorships or surface-level branding. I entered through the front. As a keynote speaker, there were over 200 people in attendance. But only one face made me pause for half a second. Darren Callum. He had no idea I would be there. And when we made eye contact across the foyer, I saw the moment he recognized me. His smile stiffened, like it had been caught mid-lie. He was not attending as a speaker. He was there as part of a pitch delegation trying to secure a logistics tech collaboration with 2 Chinese-funded accelerators. The very same people I had worked with 3 years prior, nurturing the partnership from the ground up. I gave a small nod. Nothing more. The next morning, during the private meetings, one of the investors looked over at me while Darren's colleague spoke. Then he interrupted and said, "We were under the impression Ms. Carter would be leading your representation today. Has there been a change in your firm's leadership?" Darren coughed. He tried to pivot. "Elin is pursuing new ventures. But of course, Wexley maintains our position in all previous partnerships." The investor raised his hand, cutting him off. "Forgive me, but our decision was tied to her. If that relationship has ended, we would need to reassess interest." That was the final crack. The one that split the wall completely open. By the time I returned to London, Wexley's market forecast was already under review by analysts. Their quarterly growth projection was being quietly revised downward. I did not have to check. People sent me the screenshots. But what I was building, that deserved more of my attention. I had been promoted again. This time to Regional Head of Strategic Affairs for Europe and Asia. My division was responsible for over $250 million in projected annual contracts, and we were expanding faster than even our founders expected. I spent my days mentoring talent, bridging markets, and solving real problems. And not once did I need to raise my voice to be heard. But the real satisfaction came later, in a meeting I never planned to attend. One of my former colleagues at Wexley, someone who had always been decent, even under poor leadership, reached out. She said the board had forced Darren out. That internal reviews had flagged leadership negligence and partner mismanagement. She told me something else too. Apparently, Margaret Caldwell had submitted her resignation shortly after that failed summit. Quietly. No formal announcement. She had taken a position at a different firm, one without any international partnerships. And in her final email to the board, she wrote one line that stood out. "We underestimated the structural value of a single individual." That line stayed with me, not because I needed validation, but because it proved something I had always suspected. In systems built on ego, they only value people once they are gone. But in systems built on respect, people thrive while they are present. A few weeks after that, I was asked to attend a private dinner hosted by one of the government trade commissions. I was seated next to a woman from Tokyo who represented a major transport tech initiative. She leaned over halfway through and said, "You are Elin Carter, right? From Wexley?" I nodded once. "Formerly, yes." She smiled. "We have heard about how you handled your departure. It was very elegant." I smiled too, but said nothing. Because at that point there was nothing left to say. The noise had passed. The dust had settled. All that remained was the work, and the reputation that had quietly outrun the people who once tried to silence it. There was no need for anger. No need to prove anything. They had already done that for me. By the time the year closed, Wexley Technologies was no longer a competitor. Not to us. Not in the spaces that mattered. The fallout had reached beyond just the leadership reshuffle. Their partners were dropping one by one, citing structural inconsistency and lack of continuity. But everyone in the industry knew what that was code for. They burned the bridge they did not know they were standing on. I never gloated. That is not who I am. But I paid attention. I remembered every meeting where I was spoken over, every strategy dismissed with a half smile and a note that said, "We'll take it from here." I remembered the tone they used when they assumed I had nowhere else to go. And now they were calling everyone else, looking for anyone who could rebuild what they had casually destroyed. At Sanyu, I had more than a seat at the table. I was building the table. We were constructing a cross-border collaboration system that operated in real time, a multilingual negotiation model that integrated AI and human oversight to ensure nothing was lost in translation. It was something I had imagined back when I was still with Wexley. I had pitched a scaled-down version of it in a meeting once. Darren had waved his hand and said, "Interesting, but not our focus right now." That same model, now refined and fully functional, had just secured a contract with the South Korea Smart Infrastructure Board, a multi-year project worth over $140 million. And the moment that contract was announced, my name appeared in nearly every trade publication. Quietly, professionally, without needing to say a single word about what came before. That is what real revenge looks like. Not chaos. Not fire and fury. Just undeniable proof that the thing they tried to erase has now become the benchmark. A few weeks later, I received a letter. Handwritten. That surprised me. It was from one of the board advisors at Wexley, someone I barely knew. The handwriting was neat.
Direct.
"Elin, I want to say what others should have said sooner. Your work was irreplaceable. We are paying the price for not seeing that. Not expecting anything from this message. Just respect. You earned it." I folded the note and placed it in a drawer. I did not need the apology, but I accepted the acknowledgement. And then something happened that I did not expect. I was approached by a nonprofit, one that mentored women entering tech and international business. They had followed my story quietly and wanted me to become a mentor. Speak occasionally. Share my experience. At first, I hesitated. Not because I doubted the cause, but because I had spent so many years working through problems that I had never stepped back to talk about them. But I agreed. I spoke at their spring session. Not about Wexley, not directly. I spoke about boundaries, about value, about what it means to be underestimated, and what to do with that. Afterward, a young woman came up to me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm just starting out," she said. "But I'm already seeing how they talk over us. It feels like we're only allowed to succeed quietly." I looked at her and said something I had learned the hard way. "No one will hand you the space you deserve. You have to build it, and then let your work speak louder than their assumptions ever could." I could see in her face that she understood. Not just my words, but the weight beneath them. That moment stayed with me longer than any contract, any headline. Because I knew then, the real win was not the job. Not the title. Not even the collapse of Wexley's old system. The real win was creating space for others. So no one else would have to sit through the insult I did and wonder if they were overreacting. I had turned one company's mistake into a platform, into a movement. And there was no folder on any desk big enough to contain what that meant. The real end came not with an announcement, but with an empty seat. Months had passed since I last heard Wexley's name mentioned in any meaningful room. In our world, international partnerships, multi-market development, language-driven strategy, silence meant irrelevance. They had become exactly what they once feared: background noise. But something still lingered for me. A thread I had not pulled. Then one day, my assistant placed a calendar printout on my desk. A small red circle around a date 2 weeks away: Global Markets Leadership Conference. Zurich. I had almost forgotten. Sonyu had accepted the keynote months ago. We were unveiling the pilot phase of our language-integrated deal negotiation system, a framework I had built from the notes, lessons, and roadblocks I had gathered during my time at Wexley. Everything they once called nice ideas, optional, or not in scope. That same system was now valued at over $90 million in potential licensing agreements alone. The Zurich conference was prestigious, not flashy, not performative. It was where the actual dealmakers sat down behind closed doors and built the next 5 years of commerce strategy. As I stepped onto the stage that day, the room quieted. Not because of me, not entirely, but because they had seen the headlines. They had watched the rollout. They knew the weight behind my work. I spoke for just under 30 minutes. I shared real numbers, real tools, real mistakes, the kind no one wants to admit they made until someone else does first. And I spoke not just as a strategist, but as someone who had been dismissed, sidelined, and underestimated, and had turned all of that into infrastructure. When I stepped down, the applause was not loud. It was steady, respectful, sustained. Later, during the networking portion, I spotted a face I had not seen since the day I walked out of Wexley's office. Jocelyn. She looked different, lighter. She approached quietly, without pretense. "I do not work there anymore," she said before I could even speak. "I left 6 months after you did. Things fell apart." I nodded. I figured. They tried to rebuild, but no one trusted them. Once the partners started walking, the investors got nervous. There were audits, layoffs. Margaret's departure made it worse. "Darren." I cut her off with a gentle wave. "I do not need the details." She paused, then smiled, almost apologetically. "You did what I think a lot of us were afraid to do. You left before they could finish erasing you." I did not say anything. There was nothing to add. That evening, I sat by the window of my hotel room, looking out over the Zurich skyline. There was a stillness to it, a quiet that matched the peace I felt inside. I thought about the folder, the black one with the initials EC. I had not seen it since the day I left it on Margaret's desk. I never asked for it back.
I did not need to.
Because the real record of my work was not on paper. It was in the partnerships I rebuilt, the systems I created, the people I mentored, the silence I refused to sit in. My story was not about a company that cut my pay and gave bonuses to strangers. It was about what happened next, when they looked at the balance sheet and realized the line they tried to trim was the one holding the whole operation together. And what happened next was simple. I left. They lost. I built. Others followed. It was not loud. It was not public. But it was final. They will not write about it in their press releases. They will not admit the scale of their mistake. But somewhere in a boardroom, someone is still flipping through that folder. still trying to understand how it all slipped through their fingers. And me? I am already on to the next blueprint, the next team, the next story. Not because I need to prove anything, but because once you know your worth, really know it, you never trade it for silence again.